Wouldn't it be nice to know the exact relationship between attack, defense, health, and all damage in Rise of Kingdoms? It sure would make a difference in knowing which equipment to build and which equipment to upgrade. And if you're subscribed to the channel, you know that I've brought Davor on before as a guest to talk about the relationship between these things, because he went and built out spreadsheets to do all that complex math and thinking for us. And now that the new crystal technology has been revealed, he's gone in and done updates to all of that information. So in this video, sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms, we're going to check out his review of how the balance of stats and what you should value as a player has changed. And we'll go in game and talk about some of my observations and his observations as well around how this influences what rune you pick, what city themes you value. Okay, turns out 20% infantry attack, not so bad, actually. We'll talk about equipment choices as well. Let's get after it, okay? So this sheet is showing you for specific commander combinations and specific equipment that you can sort of see off to the left there. It's meta equipment. I'll talk about what it is, and we can, I suppose, zoom in on it as well, show the picture, okay? The relationship between all damage, health, defense, and attack. The way to interpret this information, I will start over here with the old tech for the BQ Liucha march, which is arguably like the best march in the game right now. I've sort of declared it that, although I suppose I technically haven't like truly proven that. Anyways, it's my favorite march in the game. So the way to view this sheet is that 1% of all damage for BQ Liucha with the equipment you see all the way off to the left. And here's what it is, okay? We've got the set, helmet, and weapon, gloves, and boots. We've got the Hope Cloak, Eternal Light, ring, and horn, all right? This is like not a controversial set of equipment. Now, KvK stuff makes that better, and that would change these numbers slightly, but for the point of this exercise, I think it's still helpful, okay? And it is talented equipment, for what it's worth in that picture. So 1% all damage is worth about 1.69% health, which is worth about 2.52% defense, which is worth about 3% attack. That is the old view of the world before crystal technology changed. With the new crystal technology, now 1% all damage will be worth 1.97% health, 3.03% defense, and 2.93% attack. In the new world of crystal technology, attack is slightly better than defense for this combination of commanders. I really want to emphasize that, like, your civilization matters, your, like all these buffs matter. So if you're looking at this and going to statistical significance of like 2 decimal places, I just want to point out that like all of the other things must match exactly for this exact ratio to apply to you, okay? And by the way, this is on the screen, but this detailed information was brought to me courtesy of Ruz from the King's Codex Discord, which, by the way, is going to be linked in the description and also in the pinned comment. And a big thank you to him for bringing all of this to my attention and reigniting my conversation here with Davor. So, the new view of the world, health is slightly less valuable than it was before, defense is less valuable than it was before, and attack is more valuable than it was before. Now, none of that changes by too much, though. Like, yes, these things have changed, but not enough to actually change what equipment you would build. And we'll talk about that in a minute. There's a more detailed review here, okay? Consider subscribing, by the way. If you are subscribed, you know I'll have timestamps, so you can jump ahead to that part. So for cavalry, and the equipment that we're talking about here is the KvK helmet, the KvK weapon, the set chest, and boots, Navarre's Control, Ash of the Dawn, ring, and horn, okay? In the old view of the world, you would have said, this is the KvK I'm playing in right now, you'd say 1% all damage is worth 2.14 health, 2.3 defense, or 3.16 attack. In other words, health is still actually the best stat for Huo and Arthur in this configuration. In the new view of the world, now health is worth 251, defense is worth 269, and attack is worth 316. So health and defense are worth slightly less, but as I mentioned before, the big picture balance of things is actually about the same. You still value health slightly more than you value defense, which you value more than attack. Okay? And by the way, if you're wondering, like, wait, Chisgule, does this mean if I'm looking at an armament and I'm choosing between 1% all damage or 2.5% health, is this saying those are equivalent? Yes, that's what this is saying. Like, if you had an armament, okay, and the third slot of the armament was 1% all damage or 2.51 health, you'd be like, oh, that's even. If it had more than that amount of health, you'd take the health. Okay? If it had less than that amount of health, if you were re-rolling it, you'd keep the all damage. That's what this is saying. Okay, that's how you like interpret this information. Also, this is helpful, by the way, if you're looking at an armament and you're like, oh, this one armament has, cav attack, and this other armament doesn't have attack, it's got defense, and like you're trying to pick the one that's better. Again, important to keep in mind that like all of the different things down to your city theme and rune that you pick up off the map will change the balance of these things, but it's still helpful to get a look at this, I think. Big picture, okay? And then for here, we've got archers, okay? Chisgule, Herman, classic. The only archer march that is super viable right now, besides Philip. Philip's very good. Also, people are doing stuff with Ashurbanipal. Like, I joke, but, Shajar and Ashurbanipal, in the hands of the right player, you can get some stuff done. So we've got the full archer set here, ring and horn, okay? And here's the balance of the stats. In the old view of the world, it was 1.99 health, 2.3 defense, 2.82 attack. Now, it's 2.31 health is worth the same as 2.65 defense, which is worth 2.86 attack. Long story short, in every situation, attack is more valuable than it was before, but not by so much that it changes the balance of what you would make. But what is really interesting, okay, is down here, Davor has done this interesting math. What is the difference on the damage formula? Taking BQ and Liucha as a reference, same baseline as before, the change in crystal tech will get the following change, or have the following impact on combat effectiveness. So BQ Liucha is 7.31% more effective. Now look, is like, got to read the small text here, because at the end of the day, everybody's changing. So like everybody's got an elevated sort of combat effectiveness, if you will, because everybody who's in a new KvK that has this crystal technology can get this crystal technology. So anyways, there's an important thing we need to go look at here, which is say, okay, Chisgule, this is very interesting, but do I make different equipment than I was making before? And that is a very fair ask, okay? And thankfully, Davor has done that math as well, and this is really interesting to get a look at. So what he's done is he said, okay, for each set of gear that you might go craft, this is infantry, cavalry, and archers, with these specific commanders, and it matters what commanders you're using, okay? Like, Chisgule has a ton of health, okay? If you paired with Shajar instead, she's got health that I don't think Herman has, right? The point I'm trying to make is the stats from the commander influence the balance of what is most optimal. That's very important to understand. Now, obviously, commanders change, so you build a set of equipment that you think is just generally the best, and hopefully, as commanders come and go, it still is technically the best, but if it's slightly suboptimal, then it is what it is, because you can't control what stats a commander is providing, but you can control the equipment. So, should you change around equipment, or should you build something different than what you were building before? And so what Davor has done, he said, okay, I'm going to pick one set of gear, and that is going to be the baseline. So for infantry, the sort of baseline is going to be the 4 pieces of the Eternal Empire set, then the Hope Cloak and the Eternal Knight. And he calls that the reference, okay? So then he compares other sets to the reference. Is this set better or worse than the reference in the current version of crystal technology and the new version of crystal technology, okay? So this is very interesting to get a look at. We can zoom in on this a little bit here. All right, so if we start with the 6-piece set for infantry. It is worse than using Hope Cloak and Eternal Night. Rip Chisgule, who made the 6-piece set long ago. Now, look, I've talked about this in the past. There are advantages to having attack over general combat effectiveness. You end fights faster. And in Ark of Osiris, that's actually incredibly valuable. So there are situations where, like, you just would prefer attack rather than trade quality, right? Multi-rallying. You would prefer attack, generally, over trade quality, depending on whether your goal is to drain your enemy or to actually take the thing you're multi-rallying, right? So, in the new view of the world, it is only 0.14% worse than the baseline set. In other words, attack is better because the 6-piece Eternal Empire set has more attack stats. In fact, the 6-piece bonus gives you 5% attack, right? In the new view of the world, where attack is more valuable, it's a better set, obviously, than it was before, but not by much. Okay, now if we advance to KvK stuff. If you have the KvK helmet and weapon, if you made Hope Cloak and Eternal Night, and if you're on a budget and you're using Sacred Grips and Shio's Return, okay? Jumping up to the KvK stuff, even losing the set pieces here, which is kind of an interesting comparison, you are 9.33% more effective in the old view of the world, and you're only 7.13% more effective in the new view of the world than the baseline set. And that is because the value of defense goes slightly down, okay, in the new view of the world. Now, one interesting set that I would like to have compared to, actually, is the KvK pieces, the Hope Cloak, Eternal Night, and the 2-piece infantry set bonus would have been an interesting comparison, but whatever. So here is the KvK, 2 KvK pieces, 2 leadership pieces, that is the legs and the boots, and they went with Hope Cloak and Sacred Grips. And this is interesting because of the set options we're comparing to here, that actually is the best in terms of performance for BQ Liuche, okay? But it was 12.74% better than this set over here. And now in the new view of the world, it's only 9.4% better. Okay. Long story short, attack is better, but still the set that was the best in this comparison before is the best after. Okay. So, like, fundamentally what you should craft here, like, hasn't changed. Okay. For cavalry, I guess there's not that much to compare. He looks at the 2 KvK pieces, the 2 set pieces for cavalry, Navarre and Ash, okay, and compares that to if you used 3 of the set pieces in Ash of the Dawn, and actually it's worse. Interesting. So, I mean, health is still, even though health is not as good as it was before, it's still the better play. Other sets are better than they were before, though, but I think health is still kind of the best. And then down here for the archers, this is very interesting. Man, archers are just getting the tough end of the deal recently. I do think that archers are going to get majorly improved when they release archers next. Like, they have to release the most busted archers they've ever released in the history of the game, I think, to offset what the sort of weirdness of archers right now. We don't need to get into that here. So 6-piece Dragon's Breath is the reference. And if you did 2 pieces of KvK, 2 pieces of Dragon's Breath, and the leadership pants and boots, which is very popular, that was 6% better than the 6-piece set. Getting the KvK stuff's obviously good. But in the new view of the world, it'll be 4.5% better. Okay? And then if you did 2-piece KvK, 2-piece Dragon's Breath with the leadership pants and gloves, so you did gloves instead of boots, it would be 3.74%. In the new view of the world, it was 6.25. So it's actually, if you had done this in the new view of the world, it's worse. But I think most people were doing this option. Anyways, all of this shows that the percent change of combat effectiveness is like, it doesn't really change what you should make. And this is what the math is telling you. Like, it's pretty much the same. Yes, there might be some minor changes in the relative effectiveness, but, you know, having the 6-piece set Still technically not quite as good as Eternal Night and Hope Cloak, not to mention that those are way easier to get. Now, from a game balance standpoint, I would argue personally, I would like to see in general a 6-piece set, which is harder to obtain, be better than, the pieces that are easier to obtain. But hey, it's easier to collect the other stuff. So just make that other stuff. So let's jump in game and let's talk about some of the things that are the winners and losers from this update. The first thing we're going to do is talk about accessories. Oh, accessories. So because now everyone has more health and more defense, the Concealed Dagger and the Mora's Web are worse than they were before. Definitely a bummer if you have those things. I do. I would definitely relegate those purely to the realm of people who swarm now than anything else. Swarm garrisons, you want these things regardless, because a debuff scaled to 12 things hitting the same target is really good. It also works if you swarm counter rallies, so that could scale even higher. But otherwise, you should never craft Concealed Dagger or Web moving forward. They're just already people were moving in that direction very heavily, and now this change makes them not as good as they were before. I'm pretty convinced that that's where that is. Interestingly, Seth's Call is better than it was, but I don't know that it's so much better that you would make it. Seth's Call is going to make it so that you get an attack bonus applied to you and 2 nearby troops. Attack is better than it was before. I don't think this is so much better that you would make it. The only situation in which I think it's very interesting is on a full echelon march. That, by the way, the echelon formation gives a 1.2% boost to any stats you give to other armies. So this becomes 12% attack you're giving to your nearby friends. Plus, if you have Civilized Inscription, it gives Rage. So, you could make the argument for Seth's Call only in that situation. And even then, attack is not that much better that you go make one of these, in my opinion. Now, Ring of Doom. Technically, I think slightly boosted because you have less sources of all damage. In fact, the enemy now has 10% damage mitigation, theoretically. So I think that would qualify as a slight boost to Ring of Doom. All right, I think that pretty much covers the accessories. With regard to the set gear, oh man. I mean, basically any pieces that had attack are better than they were before. So, calves are going to have a lot of attack here on some of these pieces. If you were using them, that's definitely better. The health pieces are still the best. The defense gloves here are not as good as they were before. The attack legs are better than they were before. Eternal Empire set. Okay. So this is where you've got the chest and the legs. These are definitely better than they were before. I have this set. I used this set. Made it. These infantry. I'm a weirdo. Made it for primarily arc and high DPS situations, and rarely use it for the purpose of being, a high DPS thing. I don't even really play arc anymore. Then the archer stuff. Ooh. So boots, typically, the guidance here is now you go for the leadership stuff. Swapping out the archer defense on the boots, but you lose attack on the legs now, which is a bit of a bummer. Yeah, I don't know. I personally use the 6 set. Seems to work great for me. Could you do slightly better with the leadership stuff? Some people would argue that's definitely the case because of the health. We go through this on the topic of leadership stuff. See, these are the health pieces. It's slightly lower stats, but you're getting health, which generally is good enough to be considered worth it. Piece bonus here is defense. Not bad. That ain't bad. And, there are individual pieces we could talk about as well, but I think I want to shift gears away from equipment. Shifting gears, pun not intended there. And I want to talk about city themes. So 20% attack compared to 15% health is now a very interesting proposition. I'm going to stick with my 15% health, but if you didn't have this and now you have 20% infantry attack, that is a nice pickup. The 20% attack is a nice pickup. And with regard to rune buffs, right? Right now I've got health, and I'm not field fighting at this exact moment. I went to record a video here. Let me take it off of Alliance chat in the bottom. We got to get back to fighting. I got stuff going on. So anyways, we got health over here that I'm using now, but you could definitely make an argument for a 7/7 rune being better than it was before. And I certainly would look at the 14% of stats, 7 defense, 7 attack, and say, hey, Like, what am I actually trying to accomplish? And if the goal is in part pressure, then I would want that blend of defense and attack. And if the goal is purely survival, then you could make an argument for health. But I asked Davor about like the 7/7 rune versus health, and he said, well, it depends a lot on your pair. For Huo Arthur, a 7/7 is now roughly 12% better than a 10% health rune. So like, what troop composition or commander pairing you're asking about makes a big difference here. So like, long story short, I don't think that what you do with your equipment changes yet in a major way. But I do think that if you had attack stuff, it's more valuable than it was before. And now in situations like with the city theme, when you see more stats on attack, it might actually be enough more stats to be better than just going purely with health. And interestingly enough, like if I had, leadership, legs, and boots, that I suppose might be better than what I've done, especially if you do mixed garrisons, which I am right now. So like I swear, is it mixed garrison is like, I can't believe it's still used so much, but that's the nature of the beast. Enjoy the vid, throw a like on here, subscribe. Hopefully you found it helpful. Shout out to Davor and Ruz from the King's Codex for sharing this information with me and inspiring the video in part. And if you want any of that information, links in the description and the pinned comment. Until next time, you have fun smashing your enemies. Take care, everybody.